they took me to the family doctor to say, look, we're new parents, is there anything you can do? And the family doctor said, well, we can sedate him if you want, so you can have a rest. You've just got a problem child. The way it transitioned was that my love of physical movement and activity translated into sport. I'd had dreams of going to the Olympic Games ever since I was 6. And then when the scoreboard came to life, I saw GER third, GBR fourth by the narrowest of margins. And, I can ask independent sources as to whether they thought, my opinion was we were robbed. And at the time, it was a samurai sword of pain. And the emotions are very, very painful. And anger, frustration and blame, that for me was the hardest lesson, but also the greatest gift, because the next 4 years after those games were the hardest of my life. And we just managed our state, and the way we did that was we were not taking it too seriously, but we were really focused on our performance and the process. When we got up on the final of the Olympic day, my unconscious mind had been there so many times before that I was able to remain cool, calm and collected. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing.
I believe everyone has a story to tell. Through seeking true, authentic insights about the entrepreneurial journey, I provide a platform for our peers to share their stories and inspire those that listen. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My guest today is an Olympic Silver Medalist, a speaker, executive coach, mentor, author, co-founder of Adeki Performance and BBC Commentator. Delighted to be joined by the one and only Leon Taylor. Leon, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, mate, awesome. It's been great, obviously, know from your career and watching and seeing some you speak previously as well. So really, absolutely buzzing to have you on today. So thanks for your time. And we're going to jump straight into it. I've read a little bit about when you was labelled as an early age as a problem child. Tell me a little bit about how that sort of impacted you and what life was like growing up.
Sure, yeah, it's quite a label, isn't it?
Yeah,
so that was from the family doctor, would you believe? So my parents, I was the firstborn, 1977, and it was a traumatic birth, which is worth mentioning. So it wasn't very comfortable. Neither was it for my mum. And for whatever reason, when I got home, I just was never settling. So I was constantly crying, would never sleep, and this didn't really get any better. So my poor parents, there's a wonderful picture of Sam on their wedding day, and they look beautiful, vital, happy. And then there's a picture of the three of us, and my mum and dad look like they've been dug up. And so you can imagine the impact. And I know that many parents out there, and I'm a parent myself, it's a huge challenge, isn't it? So it really did challenge my parents. And what happened over a period of time is that I needed it was difficult to manage, if you like, so I needed constant attention, had all this energy. So they took me to the family doctor to say, look, we're new parents, is there anything you can do? And the family doctor said, well, we can sedate him if you want, so you can have a rest. You've just got a problem child, see how you go. So it was this kind of like shock to my parents. They offered medication. I don't think ADHD was a label back then. I don't think it had been defined, hyperactivity. So the family doctor labelled me as a problem child and offered a pharmaceutical intervention, and my parents decided not to do that. So they thought, right, well, let's see if it's just us and maybe other people, our friends and those who've had children already might be able to look after Leon. Anyway, that didn't last very long. Everyone got really busy, aunties, uncles, mum and dad's best friends. So the only thing that they could come up with, Sam, is that, like, okay, the only way we're going to get some rest is if we try and tire Leon out. And so my life of physical movement and activity started way before I can remember. So as early as climbing up on the cushions, and my dad would push me off, and then I'd go again and again, and that would be for hours. I'd go to mother and baby gymnastics, so the clue's in the description. I would be swimming while still in nappies, splashing around for hours and hours, whether it's in the bath or at the local pool. So all of these activities seemed to work. So I would thrive, I would be in my element, and I would get tired, and I would eventually fall asleep, and everyone would have a rest. So that impact really was on my parents and how they decided to guide me, because I had endless amounts of energy and I wouldn't rest. The other thing that was challenging for them is I wouldn't play on my own. Right. I needed attention. So the clues there, aren't they? The symptoms are there. So I was never formally diagnosed with ADHD or anything else. So my parents...
Have you been later in life though looked at that at all?
No, I haven't looked at it in any great detail. It's interesting for me that my kind of story and self-management and a lot of the things I'm sure we'll touch on today will speak to that, but it's not an uncommon diagnosis for high-level sports people. Sure. Being able to go into a place of hyper-focus. I mean, the sports that I ended up excelling in are the ones that, you know, are suitable for those with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ones which require individual focus. I was never any good at football, waiting around for someone to pass me the ball, because my attention would go off and I'd end up getting in trouble for not doing, you know, I was in trouble a lot when I was a youngster, particularly at school. That was a challenge. The teachers, the instructors were sit still, concentrate and be quiet. And I couldn't do any of those. And so I was constantly...
so what was school like that? View.
So in the early days it was hard. I felt as though I was always in trouble, and I probably was, and you're trying to make sense of it. You know, this is in the early days, and I was very boisterous, I think was a nice way to describe it. And there's all sorts of stories where my over-exuberance has caused, you know, probably I wasn't necessarily naughty, but the results of, you know, playing with me, and I would just try and push things too hard. I just remember something as innocent as leaving nursery or playgroup as it was known, and I'm with my two friends and we're holding hands and I'm in the middle, and we're just swinging along and skipping, you know, as you know, every 4 years do. And then I think, oh, great. And I get one goes up in the air, the other goes up in the air. I broke my friend's arm and the other one split his head open right in front of all the parents at the gate, including my mum, who was picking me up. And so it just an innocent example of how my energy and over-enthusiasm was a negative impact, I guess, on that part of the journey. And I think the way it transitioned was that my love of physical movement and activity translated into sports. And it isn't long, but I started at the local swimming club when I was 6. Gymnastics, you know, tumble tots on into, low-level age group gymnastics. And my parents really saw how much that meant to me. So they started to introduce this notion of consequence. Leon, if you behave well here, then you can do this. And there were times, you know, that just suggestion of this is really important to you, and me acknowledging that. And they were able to use that to guide and discipline me, if you like, in a way where I kind of understood and was able to begin to self-manage over time. And so I feel very fortunate that my parents went about it in that way, because it certainly worked. And over time, I was able to find my way, and I became easier to manage. That's not a very nice way to do, but I think that's the best way of describing.
I'm just interested to touch on the school. Did you find it hard to engage within the school environment? I guess at that younger age.
No, I really enjoyed being in school, but what would have been better for me is not sitting down, but standing at the back of the classroom, marching on the spot. Because if I'd have honestly, Leon, you're starting to get distracted. Go out on the playground and do 5 laps and then come back in and sit down, because that's all it would have needed. The square peg round hole thing, I was the square peg. And I was willing to learn, wanted to learn, I wanted to grow, I was interested in a lot of the things, but I just had so much energy. So I was like, I'm designed to be moving. And what you're asking me to do is be sedentary for hours and hours at end. And there was never enough play time or enough time in the sporting or the PE arenas for me to enjoy.
One of the reasons I'm interested to sort of touch on that is just around the whole, like, the education system and how it's structured. And I'm wondering, you sort of mentioned that the doctor labelled you as a problem child. Was the school a bit like that as well, or not? Or did the school sort of, I guess, with the physical activity side of stuff, did that encourage you? Or was it that you were sort of labelled a bit of a problem child at school as well? Or
I don't think those words were used. But it was certainly it wasn't unusual for my parents to be informed of some incident or something. And luckily, as time went on, it became less and less, and that ability to navigate and manage and understand, and self-manage. So when I was at junior school, I was swimming every morning. So 5 a.m. I would get up and I would go for swimming training for 2 hours. So I'd arrive at school having spent a lot of energy, and I was able to concentrate. Then I go to playtime, then play at lunchtime. And then as soon as I finished school, I would go off to gymnastics or to diving or to whatever else I was trying at the time. So you can imagine, by the time I got to junior school, I was able to burn the energy that I needed to burn, which will allow me to settle down into a level of receptivity where I could listen and take it in and be part of that system. But that was because of the structure that I was then operating within.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I guess like as well, having that support of your parents and actually, like you said, because obviously as parents, as you are yourself, as I am, all we want actually is the best for our children. But to have the doctor say that we could go down this route, and how great that it was that, as I said, you've got that support of them to be able to go, no, actually he just needs a space to have some activity to be able to get out there, and how great it was, because look at the career path you've
you've got to look back. It's sliding doors, isn't it? Your decisions are made, and my parents had no idea what they were doing, like all parents, right? Let's not delude ourselves. We've got no clue. No. We're just doing our best under the circumstances with the knowledge we've got, and we're going with our intuition and our intention of what's best for, right? And that's I'm very thankful. And my goodness, the cards they were dealt were like difficult ones. It's okay, how do we do this? And they decided to play them, and the feedback was, that works. He's thriving and settling and able to concentrate a bit more. Okay, well, let's keep doing that. And it required a huge amount of sacrifice of anything that they wanted to do to allow me and then my younger sister, 3.5 years younger than me, to go off on all our endeavours. And my sister was very sporty as well. And the reason she was sporty is because she used to go with either my mum or my dad to watch me. And then obviously she was, I want to try. And it was all of that, because when we divide and conquer and off you go. And then after time, she decided that sport was not for her. She went on into her teens, and then if you ask her, she's the clever one. She's got a doctorate and a PhD, and I'm the sporty one. So we split the skill sets.
Fair enough. And then so obviously then gymnastics at that young age. When did like the diving and that sort of come in? When was that sort of love for that?
Yeah, so swimming and gymnastics way from back before I can even recall any memories. They've always been part of what I've done. And of course, like at any sporting endeavour, you start off at a certain level, and then if you want to, you can step up. And of course, if you're competent and you're getting the results and developing the skills or the times, whatever it is, you can begin to compete at club level, county level, district level, national level for age group and such like. So I actually started diving just before I was 9. And the reason I started diving is because I was at the junior school. I was in the classroom, and the teacher said, okay, the junior school swimming gala, first year at junior school swimming gala is coming up. And then she said, okay, who wants to do the front crawl? My hand shot up. Who wants to do the back crawl? Hand goes up again. Breaststroke, butterfly, diving, hand goes up for everything. So I got entered in everything, including the diving, having never done any diving other than diving off the blocks into the pool. And then, of course, I did the diving competition. I did all right, and I'd never done before. But the diving coach of the club went up to my mum and said, do you think Leon would like to try diving? I think he's got what it takes. Because of my gymnastics background, I had the body control, and there were a few contributing skills that lend itself. So my mum said, Leon, do you want to try? Yes, diving. That was how it was back then. I tried everything, and I went off to diving. And the truth is that some people are like, Leon's really talented at diving. But if you look at that in more detail, bearing in mind I've been taking part in gymnastics and acrobatics ever since I was 1, the skill set for gymnastics, handstands, somersaults, aerial awareness, body control, conditioning, flexibility, pike shapes, tuck shapes, all of it's there in that grounding. And of course, diving now is a huge element of gymnastics, core work, conditioning work that is factored in. I just had that all before. So when I turned up in the diving pool, I loved the water because I was a swimmer, and I could do handstands and somersaults and everything. So it was like, so my progression in the sport was incredibly quick because of that background. I was still doing gymnastics at that time. So when I was 11, so just about to start senior school, I competed at a national level in all three of those sports: swimming, gymnastics, and diving. So swimming, I was 16th at the national championships for the 100 metres backstroke. Gymnastics, I was 4th. And diving, I got a bronze medal, also got a gold medal. So I was national champion in diving, and that's when I made my decision, a kind of forced decision, because both gymnastics and diving were starting to vie for even more time, and if I wanted to continue at the level. And of course, I'd had dreams of going to the Olympic Games ever since I was 6, so that was kind of fueling. Yeah. So I watched the Olympic Games when I was 6 on the TV, 1984, and I was completely mesmerised. You know, I sat there with my dad watching so much of it, mum as well. But there's a particular moment, sat with my dad and watching Daley Thompson receive his gold medal. So Daley, you and I both know what an incredible athlete, and an Olympic moment, a legend moment, right? In '84, he's receiving his gold medal, standing on the podium, and he's whistling. And so I asked my dad, I said, "Oh, Dad, why is that man whistling?" And my dad says, "Oh, I'm not sure, maybe he's trying to stop himself crying." And I say, "Oh, no, is he in trouble with his parents?" And my dad says, no, he's not in trouble, or he's not upset. Sometimes when people are so happy, they begin to cry. And I'm confused, of course, I'm only 6. And then my dad says, "Well, the reason why Daley Thompson is so happy is when you're a sports person, Leon, there's nothing greater than the Olympic Games." And my response was, "I want to go, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go." And that kind of, it just seems like any child might say that, but my behaviour's completely changed, because I would always ask my dad then, every few weeks, "Dad, when are the Olympic Games back on?" And he'd have to explain to his 6-year-old they're every 4 years. And then Father Christmas used to bring me the Guinness Book of World Records. And I would diligently write down my best swimming time next to the world record holder, my best score in gymnastics, or whatever, so I had this, passion and desire for, and so by the time they came around again 4 years later, I was totally plugged in, and that informed my desires and ambitions and goals right from a young age. There's nothing greater than the Olympic Games, and so it became, I want to go. There's a it'll be on VHS at my mum and dad's house. It's probably available somewhere, but I was interviewed at the age of 10, sat on a diving board with a brace and a squeaky voice saying, "I want to go to the Olympics one day."
Really?
Yeah. And they showed that when I won my Olympic medal, 15, 16 years later after that interview, maybe even longer.
That's such a fascinating. I mean, look, I'm sure we'll delve into it a little bit later about sort of visualisation and that, but to have a dream from such a young age and have that and maintain that focus through your teens and going up into that, like, just it's mind blowing, really. Like when you that type of determination.
Yeah, it was a seed that was planted, right, and then it kind of grows. And then when I was 6, I wanted to go as a swimmer because I love swimming. I'd never even taken part in diving, but then of course, as things change, the passion's like, okay, so all the swimmers are giants, and I'm now, excelling here and actually like this more, and then the dream was still, the seed was still there, and that passion,
And I guess it as well, like again, back to parenting and stuff, and having that grounding from your parents that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve in life, and that's. Talked to a few people on the podcast recently about that and about our start in life really, and actually the opportunities that we're allowed to have comes from school, from parents, them type of things. But a lot of it obviously has got to still come from us and within to have that ambition to want to do that. But the encouragement and that belief is so important, isn't it? I think at a young age.
Yeah, 100%. So it's interesting really. So when you're creating the opportunity. So I was always very self-determined and driven. So whenever I would come home from a bad training session, and I would have a hissy fit, for want of a better expression, I go, "I don't want to do gymnastics anymore." My mum and dad would go, "Fine, no problem at all. That'll save us X amount a month. We don't need to spend this in petrol. No problem at all. If you would like to, to stop, that's fine." And then I would calm down and go, "No, I don't want to stop." And it was this wonderful self-determined. They created the circumstances where it was me driving it. So, for example, another example, a great one is I can't remember, I must have been 10, and my mum came in to wake me up for early morning training, 5:15, and I said, "Oh, I don't want to go." And my mum, said, "Well, you've committed to going, so I'm up. We're going to go." And so she took me under duress. And then that day, I got home after school, and there was a present for me. It was kind of wrapped up, and we never get presents outside of birthday or Christmas. So I'm like, "What's that?" And Mum's like, "Oh, I'm not sure." Anyway, I open it up, and it's it's for me, and it's a radio alarm clock. And she said, "Okay, if you set your alarm now for swimming, you have to come in and wake me up, because I'm not taking the responsibility for getting you up and going like I did this morning."
Wow, and how old was you then?
10. And I would diligently set my alarm clock, and of course my mum would set hers because she wanted to get up for a coffee first and everything. But it was just that, example of it's fine, but it needs to be driven.
It's got to come from you.
Yeah, and that responsibility, it was like, well, I will take that responsibility then. And of course you have bad days. A bad day isn't a bad life. And of course, as you grow up, there's lots of things that are going on. But generally, it was that self-determined, desire and the responsibility.
Wow. It's fascinating. I love that, to just, like you say, that journey from such a young age, and that focus to, I mean, you talked about that, like, obviously sometimes about sort of bad days, and I often talk on here about challenges, especially with entrepreneurs, business owners and stuff. We on that journey, life's a journey, isn't it? And we face them things. If we go forward then to, I guess your first Olympics in '96, but then obviously in 2000 in Sydney, you sort of, I guess, so much geared up to that, and then coming fourth and missing out on it. Talk to me a little bit about that, I guess, in your mindset around 2000 and how you sort of come back after that as well.
Yeah. It's so diving's a subjective sport.
Yeah.
So it's people's opinion deciding whether you're good enough or not. Mm-hmm. So that in itself is difficult to swallow. And of course, unconscious biases are always playing out, or just biases are playing out. So the judges are often, it's progressed over the time I've been through the sport, and now as a commentator, the judges are, there's various things that have been put in place. But in the old days, the biases were the judges would be favourable to those nations who are expected to do well, and harsh, by way of what scores they're giving on the nations that weren't. And we were fighting to come through. British diving now is in a fantastic place for many reasons. Peter and I were the breakthrough Olympic medalists, and then the Tom Daley, and now we've got countless competitors, both in men's and women's, young athletes as well, who are taking it home, and they're getting the advantage that we never had then, that they are expected. GB is a diving nation, England, GB is expected to do well, and therefore the judges are naturally going to, their unconscious bias is going to go their way. So for me, 96 Olympic Games was my first Olympic Games, walking around like, oh my goodness.
I'm here.
I'm here. This is amazing. Surrounded by my heroes. Linford Christie, Colin Jackson on the same team as me, and watching Michael Johnson run his world records in his home Olympic Games in the crowd at the same time that I'm competing. Not expected to do anything. 18, did my A-levels in Olympic Games in the same year. Incredible.
Wow.
Just like magnificent. Team GB didn't do very well. This is the days before the funding came in, and this was the big change. So 96, 36 on the medal table. Team GB, 1 gold medal. And then the landscape changed for the better in 1997 onwards. The National Lottery funding came in, so athletes like myself and many others were able to get funding for the first time ever. So we got a monthly grant which would enable us to pay our rent, put food on the table, but we also got access to physiotherapists, psychologists, nutritionists, and all of the sports scientists that we never had access to before. And it kind of gave us a chance to make a play for the medals, if you like, to step up. But it was a bit of a squeeze to Sydney. So one of the other things that changed is that diving had been in the Olympic Games since 1904, always as an individual sport, but this synchronised discipline, a bit like the relay in athletics or swimming. It's it's the same sport, but there's just a different event in it. So you're not specialising in it. It's just nice to be able to do it. And that kind of came in between 96 and 2000 was the first Olympic Games that it was part of the diving programme, which gave us an even stronger chance of getting closer to the medals. So going into Sydney, Peter Waterfield and I were in the mix. It's difficult because it's subjective, and we'd been there or thereabouts. We'd won a medal at the World Cup in Sydney months before, but then going in, you've got all of the big hitters, the Russians, the Chinese particularly, who are almost unbeatable, and the Germans who were particularly strong in that event. And as you've already teed up, we ended up fourth, just outside the medals by the narrowest of margins. And what was hard about that is that the German pair, they made a mistake on their last dive. And I watched them hit the water, and I thought, oh, that's it. we've won our Olympic medal, we're going to be bronze medalists. And then when the scoreboard came to life, I saw GER third, GBR fourth by the narrowest of margins. And, you know, you can ask independent sources as to whether they thought, I mean, my opinion was we were robbed, and at the time it was a samurai sword of pain. And then, you know, others would come over to you afterwards. A New Zealand judge would say, that wasn't very fair that happened. You know, I thought that you know, so it wasn't just, you know, me taking umbrage, but it's the sport, right? And it's the hardest thing to accept, people's opinion deciding your fate. And, you know, the emotions are very, very painful. And anger, frustration and blame, you know, we all experience these things.
Did you go into that? Obviously, I guess you go into any event with the belief that you could win. But I guess with where diving was and I guess how far you'd sort of come. But what did you go in with that expectation? Actually, we're gonna get an Olympic medal here in Sydney. Was that before you went in?
Yeah, so I think we went in with the hope.
Yeah.
And the understanding that if it all went well, it could. And in retrospect, in hindsight, I went in and took it too seriously. I was too focused on the outcomes. Yeah. You know, and that was one of the big learnings from that when you evaluate your performance. Like, you know, what did you learn? What would you do differently next time? What would you keep? What would you change? You know, one of the things, you know, some things are too important to take too seriously. And because it was my second Olympic Games and because there was a chance we could win a medal, that's all it became about. And if you hold on to something too tight, you squeeze the life out of it. Yeah. And that's kind of what happened there. You know, it wasn't just because of the Germans. It wasn't because of our last dive. It was, you know, there's lots of things. It was actually the approach didn't serve us. The expectations, potentially not expecting to win a medal, but like focusing so hard on winning a medal that you are concentrating on the wrong thing. The outcomes take care of themselves. It's the performance that you've got control over. And if you know what performance you're aiming for, then it all becomes about the process. Wow. And, you know, that for me was the hardest lesson, but also the greatest gift, because the next 4 years after those games were the hardest of my life. And I would have never made it through that Olympic cycle to compete again because of what happened if I'd have already won a medal. Because as soon as it got tough in that cycle, I'd have gone, well, I've already won an Olympic medal, I'm out. And the reason I made it through the 2000 to 2004 cycle and managed to stand on that podium and overcome the challenges that I endured during that time is because of the fourth place and that frustration, that away from motivation. You know, there's nothing more effective. You know, this isn't how you should do. So there's towards motivation, which is the desire to perform and go after, you know, your goal, if you want, or ambition. But there's also, towards motivation, there's also away from motivation, which is the pain or the frustration. And so, for example, you know, if I was lying in bed feeling tired and fatigued and not really wanting to go to training, feeling a little bit like, oh, maybe I'll just, you know, take the morning off and rest, I would just go fourth. And then that would be it. I'd spring up into action. And so you could use these things. It was fuel, but then I wasn't driving myself with bash myself fourth every day. It was just at the right time. I'd remind myself of that discomfort and then bring myself back up to motion and then refocus on the process. And the process is what gets you to the performance, and the outcomes take care of themselves. So the approach to the next Olympic Games was fundamentally different from a psychological point of view. And it works, and that's the way that I am so passionate about sharing now. Whether it's with my executive coaching business that's providing me with a huge amount of intrinsic reward, or whether it's the mentoring I do of, you know, the young athletes in all different sports. You know, sharing that discovery and insight is very, very important, because we're judged by outcomes, so they're important to acknowledge. But the more we focus on them, the more they trip us up.
Love that. And I guess. I want to come on to this a little bit later, but and we will talk about that. I guess the process, journey, all those. I mean, the cliche we always say, life's a journey, etc., etc. But I do fundamentally believe in that, and I talk about it on here a fair bit. That, you know, I went through a period in my life where driven by, I'll be honest, probably by money. I wanted to create a business where I'm going to generate lots of money. I'm going to be this millionaire this time next year, blah, blah, blah. All those type of things. People would say, how are you getting on, Sam? And I'd say, I'm getting there. And I didn't actually know where I was actually trying to get to. And you take your eye off what the process and the journey is, and trying to, I guess, enjoy that process and be part of it, as opposed to having this end thing that we're trying to focus on. But I will touch on that in a little while, because I do want you to talk me through that 4 years of, obviously, because I've read a little bit about, and I think we spoke previously about, obviously going through a bit of depression during that time, and struggling with your sort of mental health. You also had multiple shoulder operations. I mean, talk me through that period, that 4 years leading up. So obviously coming out fourth in the Olympics then, and then going through what you did, going into then 2004.
Yeah.
Talk me through that period.
So when I stood at the beginning of that 4-year cycle, there's an element of okay, what are we going to do? 4-year periodized training plan where it's linear, so you've got major championships, throughout that 4 years. So kind of where you're trying to peak each year. What you're attempting to do from a performance point of view. You've got your strength and conditioning, how what weights you're going to be attempting to push and lift in order to get stronger, fitter, more agile, powerful, and that all plays in all of these different component parts. But of course, you've got a plan like that, but it doesn't always go like that. And often, there's huge setbacks or mini setbacks or things that go awry. And, there's no crystal ball, so you never know what's going to happen. And for me, as soon as I embarked on that journey, things started to go the other way. I'm looking at the plan, I know where I want to get to. And the shoulder injury that I've been ignoring successfully for 2 years, and navigating with painkillers and just willpower, is starting to get to the point now where I can't deal with it anymore. And so I'm having to look at that more seriously. And that resulted in having to step away from the sport and have a reconstruction to the shoulder. If I didn't have reconstructed shoulder surgery, then I wouldn't be able to dive, but I was also given a 30% chance of making it back. And this was the first time that I'd ever, been out with such a serious injury, and, that disillusionment and the will I, won't I ever get back, 6 months of painstaking rehabilitation. And that first surgery I did make it back, and I was kind of pushing too hard to get back. And, in hindsight, you can only do what you can do. And I was always pushing to get back that little bit quicker. And ultimately the surgery was a success to a point, but when I got back into the pool, my shoulder wasn't right. So I went back to, for what I was hoping would be reassurance 6 months later, 7 months later. But I was told the first surgery hadn't quite worked and I needed another. And that's when, Sam, things went into huge decline, because in that era in sport, and this was a huge problem, it's like you were celebrated for being tough, right? You're surrounded by, work hard, bury yourself. There's track and field athletes talking about being sick on the track at the end of training, famous sayings like pain is weakness leaving the body, and you get swept up in that. And that culture at the time, and me being, always driving forwards, it was like, right, I can deal with this. And the way I dealt with it was just knuckling down and getting on with it, kind of shutting out everything and everyone. And ultimately that saw me into a negative spiral that I carried on with, because I was thinking, well, as long as I'm keeping my body fat percentage below 7%, it's going to be fine. As long as I'm doing this, it's going to be fine. I was recovering from this second surgery, focusing, because the time pressure was on me to get back onto the team. And that negative spiral just carried on, and to the point where I'd somehow managed to recover from it, somehow managed to get back on the team. But I was massively underperforming. This was 2002, so halfway through the Olympic cycle. And I remember the point where the wheels came completely off was when I decided that I was giving up, because I'd done everything I could. And I stood on the poolside, we were in Spain, tears rolling down my face for the first time in 10 years or so, and uncontrollably sobbing, because I'd done everything I was convinced that I'd done everything. And that was the moment that things turned around. And there's always people who play a part. And Steve Foley, who was I regard him as a mentor at the time. He'd been a diver before. He's part of the leadership team, not my coach. And he just gently put his hand on my shoulder. I remember it clearly. And he just said, "Hey, Leon, remind me why you do this crazy sport, diving." And through the tears, I went, "Because I enjoy it." And then really gently he just said, so why haven't I seen a smile on your face then for the past 6 months? And I didn't realise that I'd been obsessing over the detail, and my physiology had been physiology of sadness, of tension and of depression. I'd been hunched shoulders, I'd been furrowed brow, I'd been grinding my teeth, really trying hard, because that's what I thought I needed to do, be tough. My parents, my friends would go, how you doing? I go, I'm fine. I go and see my sports psychologist and I go, yeah, I'm focusing on this, I'm focusing on that, I'm focusing on this, I'm focusing on that. And then I'd be at home like close to tears because I was in so much pain. It was this delusion that I could, get through it, and I was just needed to work even harder to get through. And that moment, that aha moment, it was like, of course. Why did I choose this bloody sport when I was 11? Why did I embark on this journey? There's no money in it, there's no fame in it. That's another reason. It's because it put such a big smile on my face. I loved the thrill of moving in this way, of challenging myself, doing a handstand on the end of the diving board, up above, like all these multiple spins, hitting the water at over 35 miles an hour. It's like bonkers to do that, but you enjoy it. It lights you up. So the one change I made when I went back to training 2 days later was I put a forced smile on my face, and it was forced because my muscles weren't used to it. But of course, now I know, and I've done tons of research into this, that physiology and emotions are a two-way street. Sometimes we smile because we're happy, but sometimes we when we're happy, we begin to smile. And so it's the two-way. So I think I messed up what I'm saying there, but if you smile, you kind of activate the muscles in your cheeks, and the brain starts to detect, like, oh, hang on a second, these are the happiness muscles that are firing. And then it releases that neurochemical emotion, happiness. And that opportunity to change your physiology. And of course, as soon as I started smiling, people were nicer to me because I was more approachable. My teammates, were welcoming and were helping me, but they were just, open arms. Oh, well, look, Leon's back. And I'm like, oh, yeah, wow. And then, of course, my buoyancy, my energy, that drive comes back, and that negative spiral starts to turn the other way. And it's amazing how quickly it turned around, because I only had a few weeks before the Commonwealth Games in Manchester, and that negative spiral went the other way, and then 4 weeks later I narrowly missed out on the gold medal in front of a home crowd at the Commonwealth Games. And that period there of learning and turning that around, thinking isn't the solution to our problems. It's often the cause, especially when we get in overthinking. And I was in a state of overthinking, paralysis by analysis, concentrating on all the details, and I just needed to go up and remind myself of the bigger picture, the reason why. And so now for me, that's informed so much of my interest, so much of my learning through my mentoring, through my coaching, through my speaking, is that physiology, your performance is a product of your state, your emotional state. And let's simplify that. There's two states. There's the right state, which is cool, calm, collected. That's where your parasympathetic dominance. That's where you access your best movement, your best thoughts, you articulate whatever you're trying to say. And then you've got a right state, which is where your body's full of tension, you're sympathetic, you're in fight, flight, freeze, and that's where you don't want to be. And the easiest way to change your state is by changing your physiology. Wonderful research by Amy Cuddy and her team. Power posing is becoming more popular now. Changing your physiology has a huge impact on your emotional state. And we can look at things I'm passionate about, like breath work, which is a huge thing now, as it should be, and how much of an important part that plays when you're trying to compose yourself to do a dive or to do a presentation or to pitch or to anything, or any of the listeners. If you're stuck in your head and you're trying to think your way out of something, thinking isn't necessarily the solution. If you get out of your head and into your body, stand up, stretch, power pose, shake, breathe in a specific way, you can really start to change what's happening at a state level. And if you change your state, then your performance takes care of itself.
Okay, I just wanted to say something about one of our sponsors, Creative Pod. It all starts with an idea, the kind of creativity that wins hearts, changes minds, and drives new behaviours. Creative Pod is an award-winning full-service marketing agency that work with their clients to become their outsourced creative department for a fixed monthly fee. For almost 20 years, they've been offering clients a full-service approach in everything from branding, PR and social media, to web development, pay-per-click and print advertising. They've been County Business Club's outsourced marketing agency for over a year now, and have been a real game changer for us as a company. To find out more, get in touch with the team at www.creativepod.com. www.olympicssilver.uk.com. Okay, back to the podcast. Wow. Mate, that is so fascinating. I mean, look, for someone that I've started looking into that since we spoke. Actually, I've watched a couple of things online. Your TED talk, which was amazing, and obviously a bit of research and around sort of mindfulness and it's something for me as a. I guess I spin many plates. I run various different businesses. People spoke to me on the podcast on various occasions about, man, I've never really accepted it. I think in my head, I've really struggled with it. Struggled with the whole thing around the breathing and just sitting there. I sit there for too long, my brain's just always working, so it's always thinking about stuff. But you know what, I really took on board a little bit about what I've listened to what you've said previously and other talks and stuff, and I've started this year off doing some breathing work. Since January the 1st, I've got the last only 3 days. We're only a few days in at the time of recording. Yeah. But I've just taken 10 minutes, my first thing in the morning, and just trying to. And you know what? I'm starting just at this very, very early stage, but just starting to think, actually, there's so much more in this and that. And I really want to touch on that, I guess, from your point of view, that being at the back of the diving board and being able to take that breath and refocusing, and just because allowing thoughts to come into your head, but actually they're going to be there and we can let them go because I'm refocusing on what I are. I'm fascinated around that. I mean, so you're saying that at that point, that was the turning point for you, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah. So the next 2 years climbing away from that was still full of challenges and underperformances. I mean, the next year we went to the World Championships, and if you win a medal at the World Championships, then you qualify automatically for the Games, and we were 4th again, right? Okay. So when you think 4th Sydney, 4th 2003, if you're stuck in your head, then you're like, oh, that's it. I'm not good enough. I'm not. But actually, that was an outcome. We looked at our performance and went, right. So this is what went well. Boom, 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 boom. What do we do differently next time? There's a few things here that we can tweak. We need to make sure we're controlling the controllables on this. We want to be here on that. And you just kind of stayed with it. But that understanding of, physiology and state, the difference is Sydney, I walked around really focused, and really focused often looks like you've got tension, right? And that's how it was. In Athens, you'd have thought, like, are they at the Olympic Games, Leon and Pete? We were just like school kids laughing all the time. This is before, any good mobile phones. So we had like these digital cameras, we were taking pictures, having a laugh. We played this game called Pass the Pigs. And we would play it all the time, but we'd also play it in between dives. So Pass the Pigs, for those of you who don't know, it's like plastic pigs. You roll them in a pig arena. It doesn't need to be any bigger than a tea tray. And they land in different positions, and you get certain points for different positions, but you can lose all your points and whatever. And you don't even need to speak the same language as the person you're playing. So there's this amazing game where we would play, and it would be so encompassing that it would take our mind off what we were doing, but not so much that we would be totally distracted. But if you've got 20 minutes in between dives at the Olympic Games, you've got 10,000 people, 12,000 people watching live. You've got 2/3 of the world population watching, 10,000 athletes, 200 countries. In diving, we competed, so it's an 8-diver final, 5 dives. Each dive takes 1.5 seconds, and you have a 15-minute wait in between each dive. So my Olympic medal cost me like 9 seconds of my time in that setting. But then, of course, you think the 1,000 hours of leading up to it. So that is a proper head-melting situation. So the strategies of dealing with the pressure, expectations, and the thoughts are going to come running in anyway. So the easiest way to deal with thoughts is to distract. And it's a wonderful way of distracting yourself with an activity, or in some ways with your breath, and then just moving your attention away from things that are outside of your influence or control. So as soon as I start looking at the crowd going, oh, wow, or look up at the screens, the improvers, or look at the other athletes and their scores and the scoreboard. I didn't look at the scoreboard once, because I can't do anything about that. And the funny thing is, after our first dive in those Olympic Games, guess where we were? 4th. So if I'd have looked up and gone, well, this is it, it's destiny, your mind starts to look for patterns that aren't there. And so I was like, well, that's uncontrollable, I'm not going to look at it. What can I control? I can control my breath, I control the fact that I'm smiling, that I'm doing this, that we've got the warm-ups that we do, and then we play this game in between, and there's a pre-dive routine. And of course, the back of the diving board is the last bit, right? So people often say, what are you thinking about on the end of the diving board? And if I'm doing it right, I'm thinking of nothing. But if I challenge all of your listeners now to go, right, think of nothing now, someone could probably do it, but not me, right? Yeah. So what can you do? Well, you can create the opportunity or the circumstances where you're most likely to fall into a flow state where your unconscious takes over. And that's through repetition and practice. You train for 6 or 7 hours a day, and not because, it was enjoyable, because it was really tough, but it was because you're trying to find that consistency and develop those skills. So it's the repetition of being able to replicate those when it counts. And you've got adrenaline, you've got noradrenaline, you've got all these other neurochemicals like firing around. So you need to be cool, calm and collected. And so it's that final thing to settle yourself. So the back of the diving board, I would stand there, name would be announced, and I would throw down what's called a chamois, which is the towel that divers have. It's something that, we can talk more about that. But anyway, it's what the divers throw down. It's like a flannel basically, but you wring it out and it's good to go again. So we have that, throw that down. I'd stand at the back before I walk forward, and then I would inhale, exhale. And then I would, as my mind quietens down on the exhale and my physiology, just done it now, I would silently say to myself, smile and believe. And I'd walk to the end. And that was drilled over years, right? And that 4-year period, that was my process. And that was the process that I practiced. That was what I would do every time, whether it was working or not.
Would Pete do the same? Was he on the same path as you? And so between you, that's exactly, you've done a similar thing?
Yeah, so we would have that routine. I wasn't sure what he would do, but we would stand, he would settle himself, and then we would walk to the end in unison. So we were, because we'd performed so many times together, you are totally... I'm saying ready, yeah, okay, go, walk. We would acknowledge each other verbally, and then you turn around, kind of at the same time, peripheral vision, you're watching, and then you get to your start position, and then I would say, ready? And he'd say, yep. And I'd say, 1, 2, 3, go. And that's when we begin the movement. And then you're into it, and then that's where it all takes place. The hardest thing of synchronized diving is the dive, because it's like a cake, right? So the dive is the base. It takes all of the effort to get the base of the cake, and then the synchronization is the icing. So there's no point in icing nothing. So you've got to work your socks off to be able to do the world's most difficult dives, and then if you can do those at a high level of execution, then you're like fine tuning the synchronization. So you don't start with the synchronization; you start with the dives. And as I mentioned, we were both successful individual divers as well. We were both 5th and 6th in those Olympic Games in the individual event. Commonwealth champion, Commonwealth silver medalist, European champions between us, worlds as well. So we were successful individually, but we came together as that partnership and that pair, and we loved competing together. And that one in particular, because we had such a laugh. And we were day one of the Olympic Games, and we won that first Olympic medal in 44 years for British diving. So it was a breakthrough moment. There was lots of people, lots of jobs on the line. If we didn't win a medal, their funding would have been cut, all this pressure. But we just managed our state, and the way we did that was we were not taking it too seriously, but we were really focused on our performance and the process. So we knew what we were going to do all day. The final was at 10 at night.
Wow, that's a long day.
So we had the whole day to to grab ourselves, but we had a process that we timed and that we'd been through before. We did a dress rehearsal 3 days before, where we got up and we pretended that it was our Olympic final day, and we went to the pool, we wore what we were going to wear, we went to the food hall, which is massive, like 8,000 seats. We sat where we were going to sit, we ate what we were going to eat, we had it all mapped out. So anything that we could, so we did this competition day, dress rehearsal. And then we did a competition in the evening. Obviously, it was just us diving. But using visualization and that setup and that waiting of 15 minutes in between, playing past the pigs, when we got up on the final of the Olympic day, my unconscious mind had been there so many times before that I was able to remain cool, calm and collected. Because I'd visualized those elements, and particularly the dives, and we could talk about visualization now because of its power. And often we use it negatively. So we visualize ourselves messing up, and our mind does that. We're designed to notice error and danger, right? So we automatically go there first. Yeah. But with discipline and with structure, you can use visualization to be the most powerful thing, in my opinion, the most powerful capability we have. Yeah. And the unconscious mind can't tell the difference between reality and imagination. So when I stood on the back of the diving board in the Olympic Games, because I'd been visualizing those dives, not the result, but those dives, thousands of times before, in that environment, because I'd been in the pool and visualizing the sounds of the crowd, the smell of the chlorine, the smell of peat, not that you smelt, but, there's that kind of thing. And then, the most amazing thing happens. You're able to manage your state in the most intense environment that you've ever been in when it counts. And you've got 4 years till the next one, and if there is a next one, and all the fourths before you.
I guess that when you actually break it down, because if you allow your mind to go there, like you said, a few things there, that 44 years since we've had a medal, like you said, funding possibly on the line.
Totally on the line, yeah.
If you don't get that, the fact you've got another 4 years to wait until you come back and do it again, the amount of people watching, if you allow, I guess, your mindset to get to that point of all that pressure, how do you? It's almost impossible to go, I'll just walk into this calm and collected. So I guess, like you said, it's got to be that process in place, and there's got to be those coping mechanisms, I guess, which I guess I'm keen to, I guess, explore that around how people within their daily lives, and especially, I guess, a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, sort of listening to this, what they can take away from that, and how they can visualise those.
Yeah, so let me give you, change your state before you enter the context where the challenge arises. So you've got a tricky meeting coming up. So if you go rushing from your phone straight into that meeting, sit down and then go into it, then you've not managed your state and the person that you're interacting with. Potentially your performance will be affected. So what can you do? You change your state before you enter the context. So outside the door, you take a moment. If you've got one, move the body. You can go off somewhere privately. You stand in this power posing position, reach up, change your physiology. If you do that, you change what happens neurochemically in your system, and then you come in a completely different way. But also from a visual, if you know you've got something challenging coming up, then visualize yourself doing it. Visualize yourself breathing calmly, moving, as you would if you were performing well, whatever the performance is, whether that's a conversation, whether it's a pitch, whether it's, whatever it is, it can be applied. And you're not visualizing the outcome. It's not you signing the deal or having the medal around your neck. It's the performance itself. How are you moving if I was going to be watching you? What does Sam look like when he's performing at his best? Is he relaxed in his face? Is he smiling? Is it a nice smile? Are his eyes soft? How's his breathing? Is he breathing into his belly? When he reaches forward to shake someone's hand, is he calm, or is he leaning forward? So all these things, and then when you go in, there's already a familiarity, and the more you do it, the more accustomed you get to it, and your ability to perform is increased, and you're dropping into that most resourcefulness place. It's not going to mean you're going to ace it, because you might not have done the prep, but you will be your most resourceful, and that's all you can ask for on the day. I mean, your job is to do your best under the circumstances, and if the circumstances against you, in my world, if there's better teams, then that's it. There's better teams. If you do your best under the circumstances, were you injured? Yeah. Well, did you do your best under the circumstances? Well, yeah. Well, that's all you can hope for.
And that's such a valuable lesson, I think, for so many. Just to, I guess, whatever we get up each day, as long as you can and go, look, you can put all these processes in place, and then you answer that question at the end. I've done the best I can where I am at that time with the information in front of me or whatever I've got. I've given myself the best opportunity.
Yeah.
That's
And the harsh reality, and this is from someone I was very lucky enough to work with, Dr. Steve Peters, who's written some amazing books, The Chimp Paradox being one of them. Yeah. And I remember working with him during my career, and in fact I heard him present, and he said that there's 3 rules which apply to everyone. Life's not fair. The goalposts always move, and the only guarantee is that there's no guarantees. So when you accept those, right, and then he goes, well, so what's left? You've got to do your best under the circumstances. Because I got caught in life's not fair. I can't believe I've had all these shoulder surgeries and the judges and and the goalposts have always moved. That's changed and these circumstances have changed, and well, that was guaranteed that I was going to be on the team, and now I'm not. So you always get stuck in those three, right? Yeah. Which there is an element of like acknowledgement that needs to go into that is a factor. But if those three rules apply, which they do, then you can just set yourself down and go, right, so what is in my sphere of influence? What can I do right now? What can I control? And then it's how you approach it. You always get to choose how you show up, and that's a lot about the physiology and the choice of mindset. It doesn't make things good and easy. It just means that you're a bit more resourceful when you approach it.
Because I guess it's looking at that thing. You always talk to people. People probably describe me as an optimist. Mm-hmm. Generally got a smile on my face, and that's how I try and I guess portray myself, and that's how I am. I guess I'm always I look at life as an opportunity. Glass always half full, so that's an opportunity. Let's go and do it. And other people, like you say, there's the negative connotations to that, where people would always look at those three things. Oh, that's always unfair. That's never going to happen, is it? And there's so much to do with your mindset and how you get out of those things and how you fit into life. I want to touch on where we are with mindset at the time, and I guess that moment. I really want. You've just won an Olympic medal, something that you've dreamt of all of your life. Well, since you, as far as you can remember.
On that day, 20 years pretty much to the day, from when it first happened. Yeah.
Is it? Talk to me about, was it that euphoria moment that you dreamt it would be?
Yes, it's interesting, really, because I don't want to try and put it into words, because it's... you almost go into a dreamlike state where you're questioning whether it's actually happened. And I can't remember being interviewed on the BBC, but I was interviewed, because as soon as the scoreboard came to life and we were the last pair to dive, and I saw, the number 2 come up rather than 4 or anything else, and that's the first time I'd looked at the scoreboard during the entire competition. It was almost like those emotions that I'd been working so hard to maintain: cool, calm, and collected. Cool, calm, and collected. That process we talked about, dropping into flow states and not paying attention to anything. And I didn't dare think about how I would feel or act if it happened, because I was so focused on the process.
It wasn't about the outcome, it was the process.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I wanted it.
Yeah.
But I knew, having wanted it so badly previously at the Olympics and how that worked out for me, I dialed it back to having a laugh. It's the small things that you're going to remember, and you're really making the most of it. Process. Boom, there's the performance. What was it like? Yes. And then I was like, whoa. 20 years to the day I watched, the Olympic Games on the TV and told my dad I wanted to go. Now I'm about to stand on the podium. Your head's in a spin. The emotions of ecstasy and just overwhelm in a good way, just buzzing through every cell in your body. And then I regressed back to almost that 6-year-old, because the reason I say that is because I was standing behind the podium next to Pete, and I have no idea why, but we're uncontrollably giggling. And it's quite a formal ceremony. You're getting your medal, and it's like stand up, and and we are uncontrollably giggling most of the way through it, trying to stop it. And it was almost like I was back to that 6-year-old who was like, when you're in the classroom and you're told not to laugh. It was literally like that. It was such an amazing moment. But also there was not an emptiness, but there's this kind of acknowledgement of like nothing really changes as well. So I still had the same problems. I was still the same person. It wasn't like, that goal's achieved, and because it was a 20-year goal, now I'm totally sorted. It was like, after that, it was like, what do I do now? And I think for me, being a silver medalist, it was like, well, I wonder if I could stand on the top step, and go for gold. So there was that element. And
so
that
was that a thought process?
Yeah, it was, definitely. It was almost like you look back at your performance and think, we could have got the gold there. If but maybe when, which didn't happen. We didn't. We were still, but you always think, well, I was capable of the gold. So
how does that sit with you? Like, talking now.
Go on.
Like we like get. Where are you in that? Do you still think about that? Is that still something like you? Because look, for me, I look at it from someone who goes, actually, to get to an Olympics, what an amazing achievement. To get on the podium, wow, what an amazing achievement.
Yeah.
And then, but still, there's that. Is there for you as a silver medal? You've got a silver medal at an Olympic Games, which a small percentage of people on the planet will have achieved. But yet, is there still that the gold?
No, not now.
Yeah.
I've made peace with all of that. There's no magic rewind button unless you can. Is there one?
Not here, mate.
Not here, yeah.
I said I'm a technophobe, so I can't.
Could you imagine? So there's kind of like acceptance of what happened. And there's always ways you can analyse it. And that was the day, and that was the performance, and it's who you become along the way, right? And that's that's the most important. But in that moment, it was joyous, and then it was like, okay, decisions. Am I going to retire? What am I going to do? Is there still a desire to compete? Yeah. Why? Well, what if? What if I walk away now and then watch the Olympic Games in 4 years' time and think, oh, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I met a load of those in the pub. Oh, I could have won the Olympics if I'd have only carried on when I was whatever. And great, good for you and stuff. But I wanted to step away from the sport knowing that I'd given my all, so no regrets. No like, oh yeah, if only I, it's like, no, I did what I did, and that was it. And those were the results. I was fortunate enough to enjoy, and here are the lessons I got along the way, and here's what I'm doing with it now. And for me, there's no element. But at the time, 2004, that drove me to go, okay, right, let's go another Olympic cycle. I was into the danger zone, 26, Olympic medalist. Already one of the oldest in the event, in the platform. So to go to the grand old age of 30, which is obviously very young, but in diving is like super granddad years. And so it was always going to be tough, and my mind could do it. And I didn't make that cycle. I retired just before Beijing because my body had finally given up. I had another 2 shoulder surgeries and a worn out disc in my lower back, hernia surgery, blah, blah, blah. And the body was just, the medical team were like, look, there's the red card. Your body can't handle what you're asking it to do. You need to stop. And that was a whole host of new decisions.
Was there an element of frustration then at that point for you, like being, I guess, getting to near another Olympic Games, but actually your body physically?
Yeah, it was frustration, but also relief, if I'm honest. Because it was just, I could feel, I was so determined, right? So I'm running into that brick wall. And I'm going to keep running into it until it breaks down or I don't get up. I mean, that's the kind of like determination we're talking about. So I created permission with the medical team, and all the way along I said, look, I'm going to keep pushing. You tell me when comes along, because I'm going to keep getting up. I'm going to keep going again. I'm going to keep exploring opportunities, because in my head I can do it, and I could. When I was
to be able to do that. That's
dog with the bone.
That's an amazing, I guess, attribute to have for anyone, I guess. Listen, to try and achieve something in life, whatever that goal is, whatever you want to achieve, to have that type of mental strength to keep getting up and having that. Look, resilient over the last couple of years, the amount of people I've talked to on the podcast, and resilience has been a massive word for obvious reasons. We've just come out of, especially within the business world, you come out of out of a pandemic. No one had that in their business plan, really.
No, exactly. That wasn't the setback that we were. Yeah.
So that resilience, but I think that as a trait, as with a high performing athlete, business person, whatever that is, that's got to be one of the biggest traits that we need to have, resilience, surely. Yeah,
but it needs to be tempered though, because if you don't have the support mechanisms in place, it can be your undoing. If I hadn't given the medical team the heads up, during that all the way through, having learnt from what I learnt before, and I was putting my hand up for help, then after, suffering with that period of what retrospectively was, diagnosed as depression because of all the symptoms that I was displaying, but I'd hidden it. And so in that period of time, I was very clear, like when I was in pain or struggling, I had open, conversations with all of those involved, but I was also very clear on how much it meant, and I really wanted to give it my all. But I needed that safety there. So, when they did step in and say, you've done everything,
you was okay.
I just, because that permission had been granted, and we need people around us, physical, mental, and social, those around us to look out for us, because we're in our blind spots, resilience and bloody-mindedness in my case, it needs to be tempered, it can be your undoing in the end, and often is. So it's that ability to, resilience is, kind of like pushing and pushing, but it's also resilience. How quickly can you come back to settle? So you push, be pushed back, and then just come back into recovery and go again. And that was my resilience, because I was dealing with setback. The injury would flare up. I would wait. I would be patient. I'd work with a physio. I'd come back in. I'd build and build and build and build. It'd knock me back again. I'd be like, okay, settle, see where we are, keep calm, speak to people, and then build up. And it was just, that was the resilience for me.
Yeah, sure.
It was, that determination of it was really for my own peace of mind. So I knew when I stepped away that there was no, I still reckon I could have. I exhausted every opportunity, but I was really clear along the way for those around me. And I think that's something that I'm really passionate about, is that don't do it on your own. It's too difficult. Those around you can provide so much support, challenge, guidance, accountability, all of those things. And everyone plays a different role. And I'm very privileged now as a coach to be able to hold the mirror up to those I'm lucky enough to work with, my clients, and go, there you go, and just not tell them what to do or anything, but just hold the mirror up, and they just have a look and go, okay. And that's just, and we all need people to be able to provide that role, and they're not always the people that you're surrounded by. So you kind of check who's in your sphere of influence, and relate to people who are gonna support you and serve you, and everyone plays those different roles.
I think that's a really powerful message as well, actually, being able to, one, I guess a couple of things, like you alluded again there around your sort of, when you diagnosed maybe, or not diagnosed, but with depression at that period, and not feeling that you could reach out. I mean, you tell me, but there's definitely a shift, I think, and there has been over the last sort of few years, where it is a little bit, it's more acceptable, I guess, that vulnerability isn't weakness, and it's okay to actually ask for help. And whereas you go back to that period, I guess, between 2000 and 2004, like you said, I guess the message and the narrative out there, which is still strong, I still think there's a strong narrative out there, unfortunately, but is that vulnerability is weakness, and that especially amongst men, I'm not generalising, but especially amongst men, there's that thing that we have to be strong and, can't be weak and show emotion and stuff. And I think, fortunately, people like yourself speaking openly about it and being able to address it, and it create. You tell me. I mean, as a mentor now, I guess do you see a little bit more vulnerability with people you worked with and that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's better that way. If in sport, one of the biggest problems, I became what I did. There wasn't, there's the human being, and then there's the thing that you choose to do. But for me, it was like, I am a diver, I am this. And it was too ingrained in my identity, and it was all about that. And actually, when you speak to the human being, and you choose to do this, and you can separate those two out, that's what's really important. So with my mentoring work, I'm always checking in with the human being, that they choose to be an athlete and they enjoy performing in this space, but their friends, their family, and those around them will still love them no matter what they do. And that for me is the fundamental, because when it becomes, I need to do this to get that, as in do the performance to get the love and the adoration and such like, which can be brought in from circumstance, from childhood, etc., then that's hugely unhealthy, and that's where you drop off. When you are a human being and you have that grounding, that there's more important things than what you do, but you choose to do what you do, and you're passionate about what you do, and you can throw yourself into it with great enthusiasm, but you step back to this space of the human being. No matter what happens, you're going to be loved and appreciated and supported. Then you can really start to perform. That's the irony. You'll perform at your very, very best if you get that right. And so it gets a bit skewed through culture and through expectations. So being an example, so I work with leaders, and people don't follow what you say, they follow how you behave. So if you change your behaviours, then that cascades down. And we are seeing now more, focus on looking after yourself, recovery, well-being, openness, vulnerability, whatever these, I don't want to call them buzzwords, but, there is a focus on that. But what does that do? Well, that makes you calmer, happier, more satisfied, thriving. Like, all of these things are accessible through that. So it's about recovery. So sport, I train very, very hard, but unless I got my recovery right, I wouldn't be able to perform. The same with business. Unless you are creating opportunities for recovery. And look, we're both parents, so we know how much that changes an external circuit. It's no good of me coaching someone saying, just get good sleep. Because they're like, well, I've got a 2-year-old, which is me. And so my sleep's been disrupted for some time now. And luckily it's changed. So it's like, well, how do you create the circumstances where you're going to get as much quality sleep as possible? And that's where you start to look, because there's pockets of recovery allow you to increase your bandwidth. And if you can deal with the stuff that's being thrown at you and you're already at 100%, you're not going to deal with it. But if you can cruise at 80% with 20% capacity, then when stuff lands on you from all different angles, you've got the ability to deal with it resourcefully without moving down this trajectory of worn out. As soon as you get to worn out, you're on your way to burnout. And the stats out there, Gallup surveys and stuff, is increasing the presenteeism, people at work who aren't really at work, absenteeism on the rise as well. So all of these stats, you really need to acknowledge that recovery is what's missing. And this culture of, what really upsets me, Sam, is people automatically in the narrative thing, they go, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. Are you busy? And I go, no. And I'm choosing not to be. And I have to stop. Because it was almost like, oh, you're busy, or you must be well then. Because if you're busy doing this, and I'm sure you fall foul to it, Sam. You're busy because you can be busy because you've got so many interests and so much drive and so much optimism. And I could do this, we could do that. Here I'm doing a podcast, I'm doing this, a magazine, boom, 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 right? So the tendency to fall into busyness as a badge of I'm doing well or a badge of honour, that's our undoing. So we need to continue to change the narrative of are you busy? No, because I'm structuring my time where I can recover. I can go and stand outside first thing in the morning, get photons in my eyes, sort out my circadian rhythm. I start my day with 5 minutes of breathwork practice, breathing into my diaphragm to calm my nervous system, so I know when I get stressed out a bit later, I automatically go back to that breathing and I feel less stressed, because I'm all about changing my state while I'm going through, because there's no guarantees, right? The only guarantee is no guarantees. So I could have a hell of a day, but at least if I start it with a few processes that are going to serve me to disrupt the build-up of angst and challenge and stress in my system, I can navigate it. And when I design and schedule pockets of recovery, and it could be 2 minutes, it could be 5, it could be half an hour, it doesn't need to be like going on holiday as recovery, or going on holiday is important. It's like, how do you structure your week, your weekend, in order to create ease in your systems? Because resilience is how quickly can you bounce back from a stressor, for me. So you have a stressful meeting, can you go outside, calm yourself down in 2 minutes? That's resilience. Or does that go into your next meeting and then you're right on it, and you can see how it perpetuates, can't you?
Honestly, I find it that fascinating. So for me, 100% I wore that badge. There's the whole hustle culture, if you're not, working 16 hours a day. I've done it myself. I've posted on social media before, I've this event, and people go, oh, you're everywhere, you're doing this, and I'm like, yeah, how you getting on? And my response has been that, oh yeah, so busy, just so busy at the minute. I'm like, actually, when you take a step back and you analyse yourself, and you go, am I being a bit of a busy fool? I'm running about doing all these things, but actually that's not great. And working 16-hour days, went to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was up working, and I'm back up because I'm out. That's nothing to actually be proud of, because what are you actually trying to achieve from being that person? And I think there was a with the hustle culture, there was that big narrative out there that you got to be out there, you got to be grafted, and the harder you work, the more successful you are. And that was different. That was the narrative I bought into for quite a long period. I think the harder I work, the more successful I'm going to be. Actually, that they don't join up. Actually, it does. I'm not saying that anything, as you've alluded to, anything you do in life, you've got to work hard at. You've got to have focus, and but it's doing them in the right way. And I think that's the message that I'm trying to get. And I'm still on a massive learning curve for me.
Yeah,
myself.
we're a work in progress,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah,
often
yeah.
say we're not a painting to be completed and hung on the wall.
Yeah.
We're constantly evolving and adjusting as our values change, our value system change through life circumstances and things happen, whether that's change in personal circumstances, children, job, all these things, a reassessment. Okay, so what's important to me? Like what's important to me about X? And then if you're in tune with what's important to you, recognition or whatever realms that you're looking at, so joy, happiness, satisfaction, all these things that come up, and tuning into that and evolving it as you move into different domains or different stages of your life and adapting. And you've got to burn your fingers, right? You push the limits and the limits will push you back and you go, okay, fine. Sometimes you snap though, right? So my shoulder, burnout, worn out, all these things. It's like, you've got to find it, and there are times where we're stretched, right, and you have to put your foot down. But if you're unaware of the ability to take it off or adjust or reset course because you're just so slammed, then you're on your way to a serious worn out burnout situation, which there is too much of at the moment, isn't it?
Absolutely that. And I think, like I alluded to a little while back, I was saying about, so certainly for me, my whole process this year is certainly more around my well-being, because I went 100 miles an hour last year. I've done lots of things, great things. I'm proud of a lot of stuff I did with especially charity stuff and bits and pieces, and I had some amazing experiences. But I did get to the end of the year and thinking, wow. I want to just go. Let's just press a pause button. It's been lovely actually. The last couple of weeks, it's the only time really in the year where a magazine's gone out. Didn't have anything scheduled. The other business I run, Fernballs, has stopped a little bit. We don't have any events, so I had a 2-week period just spending time with the family, with the kids, and being present with them and having a magical time. Dipped in and out and done little bits as I always will do, but it was lovely to actually hit that pause button for a bit. And I'm aware, and I think trying to make changes for this year. And like I said, with the mind, I'm an early riser, so I'm up at 5, which is cool. I'm okay. But trying to think, well, I will go to bed a bit early. I won't work till late as well, and get up early. And trying to be just like you said, I want to get the best performance out of me and be the best version of myself every day. And to do that, I can't do it on 3 hours sleep and doing juggling all them things. So it's fascinating and one other thing I really want to take from what you mentioned there as well about your identity and being, I think now find out. I listened to a podcast. I got Dr. Rangan Chatterjee spoke about this a little bit about.
Nice. Oh, that's. I was just listening to that on the way in. I'm a big fan of. Feel Better, Live More.
Yeah. Brilliant podcast. And I think he alluded to exactly that. Like he said, I've changed it so that my identity is my values of who I am as a person. Not I'm a doctor. Not I'm a father. Not I'm a husband. But these are my 3 core values, or however many. These are my values I live to. And then because like you, I guess, mentioned earlier, you said about as a diver, that was my identity. Because you then, when you stop becoming a diver, then what do you lose your identity?
Well, exactly.
And I think that's a really, because the same with business. I guess you
of course,
business is there. It used to be business is there and life is there, and that's how but it's very much the world of that has an impact on that. So that's your bubble really of your life. So that's the circle you need.
The curse of an entrepreneur, can't it? When you are the business and you're driving it, it's a huge challenge in that space.
I want to move on and just talk a little bit about setting goals, and we're talking about achievements, and we alluded to there with yours, and you've achieved that amazing goal, and I alluded to a little bit earlier about the cliche of the life being a journey and stuff, because I still get there's a conflict a little bit inside me where I am ambitious and I do that, and I look at how do you, or what do you do where you look at actually you have got to set goals as business people. We have to do that, I guess, and as an athlete you would, as a high performing athlete we set goals, but what do you do to make sure that you're enjoying that process and enjoying that journey to get to that goal?
Sure.
I'm keen to get you.
Yeah, so goal setting is an interesting one, isn't it? I got a couple of observations on it. So the way you went about it as an athlete, because it's quite linear, the Olympic Games every 4 years. There's like, I guess, long-term, medium-term, short-term goals. Yeah. And so you're kind of going back into the future. Where do you want to be? Let's look at it in a 4-year cycle. So at those Olympic Games, this is the performance rather than the outcome. So it's not like I want to win a medal, because you get distracted because, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know what's going to be going on? Okay, so what would be a medal-winning performance, right? So what score, performance would be. So that's what we're aiming for there. And then you're like, okay, so what do I need to do to get me there? Well, here's, in 4-year chunks, there's major championships, and you need to be kind of progressing in this way. And then, okay, so those are the medium term. Then, well, short term are what? So all of these different components, flexible, powerful. So then you start to look at the different elements. So those are the short-term goals, and then they come back even more into the processes. So what's the daily habits that I need to employ in order to take me in that way? And that's where you focus every single day. You occasionally look up and go, yeah, okay, that's where I'm going, and then you go back down into the process of what are the daily activities, actionable. Performances within that, or tasks I need to fulfill in order to get me to the short, and then again continuing to evaluate and adjust along the way. But it's the systems that support you, because you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So it's like, what environment are you in? Are you in a high-performing environment? So every time I turned up at training, there's other people there who are looking to improve. I've got a coach. It's a setup where the desired behaviour, i.e. working hard in this particular domain, is the default. I'm not getting up every day on my own, on my computer, having to self-motivate. That's a much harder setting. It's like you're looking to create a system where you can thrive when the desired behaviour or habit takes place. And there's lots of things that you can do in order to create that accountability, or going somewhere to do something, whether it's from an exercise habit or whatever. But yourself, and you've got to know how you're wired, and willpower is not enough. So people say you must be really motivated, Leon, to train 7 hours a day. And I say, well, yeah, but motivation isn't there when you're tired or stressed, and it's the same for me. So what do you need instead of motivation? Well, you need commitment. And commitment is, I decide to do that, and it's scheduled, and you do it, and there's consequences if you don't. And the consequences are, so then it's like going there to train, and that's the environment, and the environment lends itself to that. It wasn't, like I had to do it on my own. So it was the creation of the circumstances in the environment where I was able to follow those processes without relying on motivation or willpower.
Right. And do you look back at you look back at that period of training, and especially I guess leading up to 2004, that, and I think we sort of, I guess, going through the tough period that you did, but actually enjoying the process. When you look back over it, you do enjoy that journey, enjoy that experience, and you obviously, like you said, I guess that turning point when Zamboli, you said, touch on that shoulder to remind you that I do this because I love it, and that's where that enjoyment then.
So you get to choose where you place your attention, don't you? And when you're doing it well, I would argue you're getting satisfaction out of it, an intrinsic reward. So it's not about the accolades and recognition, it's about that this is me on purpose, or you're dropping into an experience of flow, or that's what happens often for performers, and that is what's enriching. So finding the joy in what you're doing, or the satisfaction through it, and that doesn't, you can still find joy in the grind, when you get to the end of a day where you've really given it your all, and you put your head on your pillow, physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted in a good way, and you've got time to recover, then that is joyful. But in the time when you're, midway through whatever it might be, which is challenging, that's, let's be honest, that's not joyful in that moment, but it's the deferred gratification, isn't it? It's that I'm going to work through this now because I know that the satisfaction intrinsically will be there at this point in the future. So it's being able to turn up and do your reps. And deal with the boredom if boredom's involved. People often refer to great athletes are the ones who are just willing to put in the the reps, and they don't just walk away when it gets a bit boring or a bit tough.
Amazing, I love that. Look, let's just talk a little bit now. I just want to go into, obviously, you mentioned about retiring, obviously, in 2008. Was there, coming up to that period, and then when you did retire in 2008, had you started to think about what life would be like after diving, or what that next process would be like for the next few years? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the transition from sport into life after sport is a tricky one for most athletes.
Yeah, sure.
I feel very fortunate for me that I had my shock 6 years before, where that period of depression, I suddenly realised I was totally ill-equipped if it was all over, and that was part of the scariness of that situation. I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I thought I was going to continue diving forever. Obviously I didn't, but I'd never really given it any thought, and I was so embroiled in my identity as a diver, who I am, Olympic diver. That was it. Like, well, what else do you do? I'm just an Olympic diver. And then I realised that it could be all over, and it looked like it was all over. And so coming out of that period then, and even in the build up to 2004, I was very much aware of what else is there. Who am I? Difficult question to answer, but probably a better one is like, what else is important to me? Or what is giving me so much from this sport? Performance, being with people, working hard. There was like elements. It's like, okay, so what else is there that I'm interested in? What are other people doing? It started to open my eyes a little bit. Started to pay a bit more attention to what I was doing outside of the pool. I went back to university. I studied business and finance. Did a HNC. I didn't do the full degree, but went back as a mature student to doing something completely different. I started to explore, being a children's TV presenter, which, by the way, wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be. So when I explored it, went to do a screen test and do some shadowing, realised that actually wasn't for me, because it was a lot of waiting around, it was a lot of scripts, whereas I was very much in the live. And I was like, okay, so what's the live version of that? Okay, so going to visit schools and, talking to children about making good choices or having ambitions, goals, dreams. Oh, that sounds like fun. Oh, public speaking. Do you get paid for that? Wow, yes, you can. How interesting. What are the skills do you need? And so for me, over those years leading up to even Athens, I'd already started to develop interest in skill sets. And then post Athens, when I'd already won my Olympic medal and had the opportunity to go and speak and go to schools and speak to businesses, and so I was already building those skill sets. So 04 to 08, I was kind of ready with, well, I could just do this for a while while I figure out what I want to do. And here I am nearly 20 years later, still trying to figure out what I want to do. So, a diverse load of interest, but there are common themes, there's working with people and, performance. But now for me, wellness, I've been teaching yoga and been part of that space for well over a decade now, in fact 14 years, and I never knew yoga existed until the medical team told me you should try yoga because it's going to help your lower back, which, by the way, is really bad. But that gave me a new understanding of calmness, which I'd never been able to access. That meditative practice. I'm now a lead trainer on the Headspace app for mindful movement, which is something I'm very proud of, and I'm able to now really throw myself into areas. Mistakes that I made where I was so focused on performance at the expense of my wellness, both my physical and mental wellness over time. And I learned that by getting my fingers burnt. So now I speak confidently through my own experience about how important it is to build a foundation of wellness. So when I'm working with an exec and they're too busy to listen to, the first thing I do is I have a wonderful device, various diagnostics that I can run, but the most powerful one is an ECG wearable device you wear for 7 days that tracks your heart rate, and particularly your heart rate variability, which shows your stress response 24 hours of the day, how good your sleep is, the effect of alcohol, the effect of any physical movement, etc., etc. And so it's a physiological window into the soul, and it's an opportunity to grab someone's attention and allow them to look at how they are operating from a physiological level and compare that to the story they're telling themselves, which is obviously sometimes there's a little bit of a difference there. I'm fine, it's okay, red wine's good for me, I only need 3 hours, whatever. And then you kind of look at the physiological data, and then it's a conversation to go, okay, so this is not cool in these areas, you can see that, and that's you, so what can you do to tweak it? And that for me is now a real focus. Is if you want a sustained high performance, I get that, but this is the way to go about it. and it's a way that's kind of built to last with that possibility of enjoyment for most of the time, and it's going to give you a chance to really thrive rather than and then crash.
That's amazing, and it's a powerful message, isn't it? And I guess like for you, because obviously you've mentored people like Tom Daly, for example, and talk to me a little bit about that. Obviously, the mentoring side of it. I guess someone like you said, what you've been through in your journey, being able to then talk to people within that, especially within that space, within the diving arena, being able to must have helped massively, I'm assuming, for them, especially with the whole well-being side of stuff.
Sure, yeah, I hope so. So I was very fortunate to be part of the Team England Futures programme summer of 2022, where the athletes who were tipped on their trajectory for all the different sports that they one day would put on a vest, whether it was Commonwealth Games sport or not, were given the opportunity to get close to the Commonwealth Games and get an insight into what it's like behind the scenes, go to events, speak to athletes and everything. I was lead mentor in that programme. So I feel very privileged to have been part of such programmes. I work with Sports Aid charity who support the next generation of athletes coming through, and speaking to athletes before they make it, when they're forming their strategy, skills and decisions is so important. And again, being able to share from my insights and experiences, but also having worked with many others, it gives me such an opportunity to guide or to get young athletes to consider how they're approaching things. And then it's up to them, right? It's not about me telling anyone what to do, but it's about guiding and inspiring, mentoring in that very non-directive way where they make all the decisions, but you're there to guide them. And it's hugely gratifying. When I was an athlete, the whole world revolved around me. It was all about me. It was about my performance on that day. There were all these people inputting, but now life after sport is all about other people and how I can support and challenge them to get to where they want to go, and intrinsically rewarding, even more so than the standing on the podium stuff that I did for many years. Yeah, it's massively rewarding.
You can tell actually as you're talking about it, I've heard you speak about it previously as well, and that it seems that amount of fulfilment you must get from that and helping others and supporting that. You can tell that. I think it comes across as a passion for you, surely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's awesome. Look, we're sort of coming to now. I wanted you to leave me, before we go into the sort of quick fire questions, last couple of questions I wanted to ask. A couple of things just to leave maybe for some of our listeners is I'd love you to highlight sort of maybe some 3 key elements possibly that you've taken from your sporting career that you've taken into the business world that you could maybe share with us.
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? So I guess the first one is that you get to choose how you show up each day. You don't get to choose the circumstances, but you get to choose your attitude, how you show up. One thing I've taken is consistency. So I came out of an area where I was one of the best in the world, and then I would be deluded to think that I would step into the next space and automatically be the best in the world. And it's that consistency of showing up every single day, showing up. So the consistency is key, whether you're trying to build a new habit, whether you're trying to build a business. Consistency is the word. And the other one is the physiology, is the smiling. So what is that? It's that two-way street that I've already talked about between physiology and emotion. So coming into a setting that's challenging is I get the choice to hold my body in a particular way. So whether that's with a gentle smile or chin up, chest up, and I do that before I enter the context where I'm going to be feeling a little bit uneasy. Imposter syndrome is just very real and very normal for all of us. It's just a little bit of uncertainty that if we pay too much attention to can be built up to overwhelm. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling uncertain here, that's okay. So I am not my thoughts is a good steadying, but I can also change my physiology as stepping in. So those are things that I do consistently. I choose how I show up. I don't get to choose my circumstances. It's all about the consistency and physiology.
Brilliant. I love that, mate. Listen, it's been like an education sitting chatting to you. It really has. It's just fascinating. I could chat to you for many more hours. I appreciate we're going to wrap up. So tell me, what does the future hold for you?
Yeah, so I'm the proud father of a 2.5-year-old, and as we talked about earlier, it was like, oh, are you busy? And well, yes, I am busy, but what's taking up my time is learning the most difficult role that I've ever, had the privilege to play. Sure. And I'm very fortunate that I have a diverse interest. So my coaching company is speaking, presenting, some of the stuff I do. That list that you read out at the beginning, it gives me a lot of opportunity to dip in and dip out of things. But now my focus is spending quality time, learning, growing, and developing, and observing my son as he does his thing. It's incredible to watch. And people say, is he going to be into sport? If he wants to be, good for him. I'm going to allow him to direct his passions wherever he wants to go. I want to give him a broad opportunity to try different things and see where his passions lead him. And that for me is rewarding. And I'm just coming out of the I guess 2.5 years of sleep deprivation. So the future holds a little bit more of a focus on my own wellness, particularly building those foundations of sleep, but also working with people through this very challenging time. So post-pandemic into economic challenges going forwards, high levels of stress, overwhelm, and I'm in a place where I feel I can contribute positively to support people, both in the sporting industry, but also in the exec world, because it's hard, and we all need someone to support and challenge us in the right way and to call us out, and that's something that I'm really passionate about now in my coaching work.
Amazing. Listen, I know that me personally as a business owner, how much I've got from this, and I'm sure all of our listeners will as well. So thank you so much for obviously sharing your wisdom and your journey, and it's such an inspiring story as well. So thank you for that, mate. And look, we're going to finish as always with our quick fire questions. I'll throw these at you. So one piece of advice would you give to your teenage self?
Teenage self, I need to get him to stop and listen. It would be to slow down. So when you're so driven, as I was, there was a sense of urgency about everything. If it wasn't done by yesterday, it wasn't quick enough. And you miss so much, because what I've realised now is, the big stuff is the small stuff. And I was so focused on what's next, what's the future, next goal, next thing. I was leaning so far forward, I was so future paced that I forgot to savour the moments. So if I could go back and say, slow down and savour those moments, because those are the ones that are going to count.
And having children certainly brings that to light, doesn't it? Because it's being present with them, and we only get one shot of that. And that time period, like you alluded to earlier, about time and watching them grow is a magical experience. It certainly is. So, I love that. Who has inspired you in your career and why?
Well, the first people that come to mind who are worth a shout out, we've talked about them already, are my mum and dad. Yeah, sure. There's lots of inspirations along the way, but if it wasn't for their commitment, in some ways sacrifice, and the way that they went about it, we talked about the alarm clock and, okay, that's fine if you want to stop. And it was just creating the opportunity for me to to drive it. It's incredible, because they were doing the best with the skills they had under their own circumstances, and so it's what they did in those early days set me up. And then it was when I get to that level of responsibility where it's all on me, and they're there to support, and they always were, and they took great pride in everything I was able to achieve, but also overcome as well. It was hard for them to watch those periods of challenge, but that's part of the process of living, isn't it?
Yeah, learning. Of course. I love that. Love it. Right. Can you recommend a book or a podcast to our listeners that's had an impact or influence on you? Yeah,
well, we've mentioned it already, haven't we? So the podcast that I'm a big fan of is Rangan Chatterjee's Feel Better, Live More. He's got fantastic guests. It's long form, and I do a lot of my learning on there. So I'm fascinated in the space of performance and wellness and well-being and everything. And it's just a fantastic podcast. He's got Bite Size on there as well. So that's the one that, funnily enough, we've mentioned already, and that's the one that I go to. I'm a big fan of podcasts as well, but I think Rangan's is definitely worth a listen. And then book wise, James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Okay, yeah.
So we talked about processes, goals, and everything like that. So I delivered a session recently for the London Business Forum, specifically on habits, and I was referring to lots of the books out there, VJ Fogg and Charles Duhigg, but also the one I'm mentioning, James Clear's Atomic Habits, because this time of year we're talking. It's the beginning of the new year, and there's the New Year's resolutions and all the kind of stuff where it doesn't. But if you can get your habits dialed in and systems in place and know the mechanics of that, it gives you an opportunity to manage yourself and make changes that are sustainable, and that's something I refer to a lot in my coaching. So James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm like I said earlier, obviously I'm a big fan of Dr. Barry. His book as well, but his podcast is fantastic. Like he said, he's got some great guests in there, so it's a great one. So I'll put that in I've done my top 5 for 2022, and that was on mine. So yes, I'm a good fan. But I'm going to wrap up. Final one. What is your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
So there's a quote that comes to mind, so I'll share that. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. I think that's from George Bernard Shaw.
Love that. Wow. Mate, what a great way to finish. Thank you. Listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real, honour to have you on, and a real privilege. So thank you so much. And like I say, I can't wait to share this episode because I know people will get a lot from it. So listen, good luck with getting a little bit more sleep.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sam. I appreciate that.
2.5 years, and good luck with everything. And look forward to seeing more from you in the future. So thanks again for your time, mate.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
As they say, is a wrap. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions.